Welcome to another exciting new video about Stoicism, talking about Stoicism, and we were going over the moral letters from Lucius Annaeus Seneca. This is a letter that I would love to read to you in its entirety because it's quite interesting, but it's a bit long. So I'm just going to do the first two paragraphs, and I'll take it maybe in a slightly different direction, but there we are. From Seneca to Lucilius, greetings. In asking for philosophy to be divided up and have its huge body dissected into its various limbs, you are requesting something useful, or rather essential, for anyone making haste toward wisdom. It's easier for us to reach an understanding of a whole by proceeding through its parts. If only we could encounter philosophy in its entirety, the way we view the entire heavens at a single glance. And indeed, it would be a sight like the heavens. In that case, every mortal would be seized with wonder at it, and abandon those things we now believe to be great in our ignorance of true greatness. But since this cannot be, we must view philosophy in the same way as one studies different portions of the heavens. To be sure, the intellect of the wise embraces the entire mass of philosophy, and surveys it as rapidly as our eye surveys the sky. For us, on the other hand, whose range of vision is limited by the mists we have to peer through, particular details are easier to register, since we are not yet capable of grasping the whole. So I will satisfy your demand and divide up philosophy, but into parts rather than little bits. Dividing is useful, mincing it fine is not, because what's very small is just as difficult to grasp as what is very large. The population is divided up by tribes, an army into units of 100 men. Everything that has attained some magnitude is easier to apprehend when separated into parts, provided, as I said, that these are not too numerous and tiny. An extreme division is just as faulty as none at all. When anything is reduced to a powder, it ceases to have any structure at all. And then he goes on in rather an informative manner to kind of divvy up philosophy and the aspects of it and why it's important, that sort of stuff. What I thought was interesting in this context is thinking about how you approach something as complicated as any school of philosophy or any school of thought, or for that matter, any type of religion. And I'm certainly not saying that philosophy and religion are the same thing, but both of those endeavors try to guide you through life. Let's put it that way. And what I always find very interesting is that I have known a lot of people over the years who incorporate specific parts of different schools of thought into their everyday thinking and the way they approach life. Eclecticism, in other words, or in fact, other words expressed in one word. What I always find fascinating about eclecticism, that I'll take a little bit from this and a little bit from that, and a little bit there and a little bit here, like that sort of thinking. What I always fear is that that kind of thinking leads to a confusion of ideas that is not really helpful. And that is not at all meant in an offensive way or something, but for some people this seems to really work. But I cannot say I fully understand that line of thought. And the reason for that is that I've had like friends like this who are like, well, I don't believe in God, but I do believe there is something. And I do believe in reincarnation. And I do believe that angels are real. And I do believe that Buddhism, like basically that, like this sort of reasoning of like, I think this and that. What I find interesting about that kind of thought is that it's tempting to say, well, you take away the best of all these different philosophies of life, and then you try to apply them to your life. And if you really do that, I guess there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. But I find that often, I think this was actually a description of Gordon Ramsay that I found quite charming. Fusion leads to confusion. Obviously, he was talking about cuisine and foods and merging different cuisines. But I think in a lot of ways people think about life, it's the same thing. Fusing all kinds of things that don't go together, I think, just lead to confusion and not really to anything coherent. And I find it very interesting when people say things like, well, I am a Buddhist. Okay. Just like with, say, Christianity, and I am aware Buddhism is not necessarily considered a religion. But I mean, as with Christianity, there are a lot of different branches. As with pretty much any religion in the world, there are a lot of different branches. Buddhism is no exception. What kind of Buddhist? What sort of Buddhist are you? Are you a Buddhist because you read a popular book on Buddhism and you like some of the teachings and that's it? Does that also mean that you've given up eating meat? Because, you know, that's part of that philosophy of life, right? Some branches of Buddhism the people who practice those branches don't eat onions or garlic. If you're part of that, have you sworn off onion and garlic? I personally don't care if you have not. But then I wonder, are you truly practicing that specific thought system or not? And I know people. The Stephen, my friend from Calgary, who does do this, who does practice Buddhism and does all the things, doesn't eat the meat and all that stuff. Okay, great. Anyway, so what I'm trying to get at is, if you do that sort of thing, obviously I'm not going to stop you. If you do the thing of I take a little bit from this and a little bit from that and a little bit there, I'm not going to stop you. I just wonder how much in the end you then really end up taking away from such a set of philosophies of life. Coming back to philosophy, well, saying I like philosophy is fascinating because there's a lot of different kinds of philosophy. Modern philosophy is very different from Hellenistic philosophy, like what the Stoics practiced. And even within Hellenistic philosophy, you have the Stoics, you have the Cynics, you have the Cyrenaics, you have all kinds of different schools, right? So well, that's interesting too. For me, I try to practice a pure form, I suppose, I don't know how else to put that, of Stoicism that is not affected by other things. But having said that, there are some things the Stoics believed that I can't really get behind. The idea of the universe as a rational creature, maybe unified with Zeus, maybe not. They're a little vague about that at times. I'm not sure I can really back that up, as they say. That's not really my thing. However, when it comes, that's Stoic physics. So we understand physics a lot better than the ancient Stoics did, right, in this day and age. I don't have to fully believe the Stoic physics. I can say, well, okay, but put in a historical context, I don't think that's how the universe works. I don't think the universe right now is thinking about my fate, for example. But when it comes to Stoic ethics, which is what these videos have mainly been concerned with, I try to stick to those rules. I try to stick to the questions of, is this within my control or is it not? Is it something I can change, something I cannot change? Can I take a step back to control my emotions? Sometimes I can, sometimes I cannot. I think I'm getting better at it. That is progress. Progress is good, Stoic ethicists say. So I try to do those things. But I would find it stranger if I would say, and frankly, Seneca does this a lot. He borrows a lot from other schools of philosophy, right? More hedonistic schools of philosophy, for example. I would find it more difficult for myself, to say, well, I like this about the Stoics, and I like this from the Cynics. Those two schools are fairly related, so they might be able to get away with that. But you know, when it comes to very other specific schools, I like this from Aristotle and like this from. I think things would get diluted, and that was really the point I was trying to make. That was not the point Seneca was trying to make. He was just trying to give an overview of philosophy, and that you cannot embrace the whole thing. You have to divvy it up in pieces and then study little pieces at a time, and then you will move forward, which is a very useful endeavor. And I think that's how you best learn and how you learn to apply these things. I was just triggered thinking about the eclectic approach that I think characterizes our modern times a lot. I find that very interesting. I find it very interesting in many ways, and in no way is this a dig at anyone. I say again, if that kind of taking a little bit from this and a little bit from that works for you, then you should absolutely do that. But then, what are you in the end? What is guiding your thought? Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just that's just something I worry about then. Not worry about, that I wonder about then. That's it. Odd story. I hope this made sense. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time for more talk about Stoicism. Bye.